Between stagecoach trails and contested frontiers, some women defied both the law and the rules of their time. Today, we tell how gunslingers, smugglers, and saloon owners planned heists, dodged sheriffs, and became legends. We'll trace the context, separate myth from record, and understand why their names still echo through the Old West. Number 1. Ever wondered how someone becomes a legend in the American West? Pearl Hart is one of those cases. Born in Canada around 1871, she married young to Frank Hart, tried her luck in different towns, and when money ran short, she showed up alongside Joe Boot, probably a fake name. In May 1899, on the route between Globe and Florence in the Arizona Territory, she dressed in men's clothes to go unnoticed, and with Joe, held up a stagecoach. They took about $430, but Pearl gave $1 back to each passenger so they could buy food when they arrived. That gesture didn't erase the crime, but it helped build her fame. The pair was caught a few days later. Pearl briefly escaped from a local jail before the trial. In court, she was acquitted of the main robbery charge, but soon tried again and convicted for taking the driver's gun. She was sentenced to Yuma Territorial Prison. Joe got 30 years and eventually escaped. In 1902, when Pearl was pregnant, the territorial governor granted her a pardon, and she was released. From then on, the trail goes cold. Some reports say she joined shows where she reenacted the robbery and sold signed postcards. Others claim she settled into a quiet life, maybe under a new last name, far from the papers. What remains is the image of a woman who defied both the law and social roles at a time when the West was turning into the modern world. Between fact and myth, Pearl Hart still stirs the same question. What, after all, is justice on a frontier still being built? Number 2. Reaching California during the gold rush and earning a spot at the card tables wasn't for beginners. That's when Eleanora Dumont, just over 20, showed up at the blackjack tables in San Francisco. Some said she came from New Orleans. Others swore she had a French accent. What no one argued about was her control over the game. Steady hands, fair dealing, and straight talk with anyone who tried to test her. When rumors of cheating at the Bella Union spread, her reputation took a hit. She didn't wait for things to blow over. She moved to Nevada City, opened a place called Vingt et Un, and drew minors who'd cross their shifts just to watch her deal. There, she set a standard. Clear rules and no-nonsense payouts. Her wandering career took her down rough roads. In Carson City, she met Jack McKnight. He convinced her to invest in a ranch, and when he had the chance, sold off the cattle and ran off with the money. Eleanor tracked him down and pulled the trigger. After that, the nickname Madam Mustache, given for her faint mustache, stuck, and hard times followed. Judged by some and sought out by others, she kept traveling, setting up tables wherever there was dust and people willing to gamble. Luck ran thin. In 1879, after a string of losses in Bodie, she mixed morphine with wine and ended her journey. What remains is the story of a dealer who ruled the frontier saloons and paid dearly for trusting the wrong man. Number 3. At 14, Lillian Frances Smith joined Buffalo Bill's Wild West show and took on the persona of Princess Winona, presented as a Native American. It wasn't just marketing. It was the loophole she found to get around the rules that dictated where a woman in the 19th century could or couldn't be. While Annie Oakley kept a modest image, Lillian thrived on confrontation, promoted herself boldly, and wasn't afraid to poke at her rivals. The tension grew, and she left the troupe, but not the stage. She toured the country with increasingly difficult shooting acts, blending precision and showmanship, constantly reinventing herself as entertainment trends changed. Her path shows the tight weave between publicity, invented identity, and ambition in a world that sold the West as myth. In 1930, when she chose to be buried in Sioux attire, she made one final act of authorship over her own story, declaring that her place was not on the sidelines but at the center of defining who she was. Number 4. At the end of the 19th century in the Oklahoma Territory, a young woman crossed the line between law and crime. Rose Dunn, known as the Rose of Cimarron, grew up among brothers tied to smugglers and outlaws. In that world, she met George Bitter Creek Newcomb, a fugitive from the Doolin-Dalton gang. Their meeting sparked a bond that pulled her into the heart of the conflict. In 1893, a shootout with federal agents sealed her name in legend. Under heavy fire, she ran to deliver ammo and a rifle to Newcomb, helping him escape. The act became part of her myth, but it came with a price. In 1895, when bounty money spoke louder, Rose's own brothers ambushed and killed Newcomb along with Charlie Pierce. Their deaths ended the romance and revealed the harsh logic of the fading West. Over time, Rose changed course. She left the outlaw life behind, married a politician from Oklahoma, and spent decades out of the spotlight. Her path, from small-town girl to quiet public figure, shows how family ties, bounty money, and the reach of the state reshaped destinies. Looking at her story, it's clear the frontier wasn't just on the map. It was made of choices that could save you one day and doom you the next. Number 5. Few people recognize the name Mary Catherine Horany, but Big Nose Kate made history. Born in 1849 in what was then the Austrian Empire, she was the daughter of Dr. Mihaly Horany, who worked for Emperor Maximilian in Mexico. After the emperor's fall, the family moved to the United States. In Iowa, a series of losses hit hard. With no safety net, Kate learned to fend for herself. As a young woman, she sought work and independence in frontier towns where gambling and whiskey set the pace. It was in that world she met John Henry Doc Holliday, a trained dentist and gambler. Their bond was quick and full of ups and downs. It's said that when Doc was jailed in Texas, Kate started a fire to cause chaos and held the guard at gunpoint, helping him escape. Whether that's fact or legend, the story stuck. It fit her bold, no-nonsense style. In time, the two headed for Tombstone, Arizona, site of the OK Corral gunfight. Before the showdown, Doc urged Kate to leave town. That separation became permanent, but she carried on, surviving the rough edges of the West, saloons, boarding houses, and small ventures that kept her afloat. In her later years, Kate found refuge at the Arizona Pioneers' home in Prescott. She died in 1940 at age 89. Being remembered only as Doc Holliday's woman doesn't tell the whole story. Kate was the lead in her own journey, built on displacement, calculated risk, and a stubborn will to keep going when most would have quit. Number 6. At the end of the 19th century, a woman appeared who chose to live outside the law and still hold her head high. Etta Place. Almost nothing about her beginnings is certain. Records are scarce, names change, and some say she was the same person as Ann Bassett, a cattle rancher from Utah. The story becomes clearer when she crosses paths with two names straight out of legend, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. With them, Etta joined the Wild Bunch's string of bank and train robberies. She wasn't just along for the ride. She tended the horses, planned routes, kept an eye on the money. When the chase got too close, she'd mount up and disappear with the essentials. Reports tell of escapes through canyons and nights around campfires where silence meant more than a promise. As the pressure from the law grew, the trio fled the United States. In Argentina, they tried to start fresh. They bought land and played at being ranchers, but the old trade called them back. There are reports of a robbery in Rio Gallegos and a few smaller jobs after that. The trail then leads to Bolivia, where the most told version says Butch and Sundance died surrounded by soldiers in 1908. From there, Etta's trail goes cold. And what came next? The theories abound. She quietly returned to the U.S., took another name and started a business, or died young without record. No proof, just gaps. Maybe that's the point. Etta Place stayed suspended between archive and rumor, someone who preferred to leave questions instead of a clear ending. That's why, whenever the Old West comes up, her name always returns. Number 7. Pearl DeVere. Who was Pearl DeVere? Her story cuts across the West and shows how a woman learned to read her own time. Born in the Midwest, she left home in the late 1870s and tried her luck in Denver, where she took the name Mrs. Isabel Martin and catered to the wave of men arriving with the railroads. It wasn't just about survival. She learned how to negotiate, choose her clients, and set rules in a business that operated in the shadows. When the silver crash of 1893 wiped out fortunes, Pearl moved to Cripple Creek, the center of the gold rush. There, she built a house in the red light district and quickly stood out. She charged high prices, demanded respect, and protected her staff. She set boundaries: a doctor when needed, decent rooms, agreed-upon hours. Meanwhile, her family back in Indiana thought she was a seamstress, a convenient version in an era when reputation opened or closed every door. In 1895, she married C.B. Flynn, an industrialist who promised stability. Fire took everything: his factory and her business. The marriage fell apart, Flynn left for Mexico, and Pearl stayed. Instead of backing down, she opened the old homestead, which became a landmark. The women who worked with her earned better pay and had a say in how things ran. June 1897 brought the end of her story. After a night of celebration, Pearl, unable to sleep, took laudanum, sold at the time as medicine. By morning, she was found dead. What remained was the image of a businesswoman who navigated between social hypocrisy and economic reality, read the tides of the mining boom, and set more humane standards for a trade pushed into the shadows. Her story helps explain what the West really was: opportunity, risk, and choices made out in the open. Number 8. Few people remember Laura Bullion, but her trail runs right through the height of the Old West. The daughter of Henry Bullion, she grew up in a world where the line between law and crime was thin. Still young, she took up with Ben Kilpatrick, the tall Texan, and William News Carver, both tied to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid's Wild Bunch. Laura wasn't a sidekick. She forged identities, planned routes, and made sure the gang's money came out clean after their hits. When the Great Northern Train was robbed in July 1901, the job brought in a fortune and set off headlines across the country. Soon after, she was caught with fake bills and sentenced to a little over 2 years in prison. Once released, she turned her life around. Quietly, she worked, paid her bills, and stayed far from her old crowd. She died on December 2, 1961 in Memphis, closing a life that began in the dust of the trails and ended in the quiet of the city. Number 9. In the early 19th century, the American frontier had nothing glamorous about it. Wind rattled the boards, neighbors were half a day away, and danger waited on every trail. That's where Sarah Jane Newman was born, in 1817, in Illinois. Her family headed west by wagon toward Texas, where the rule was simple: hesitate and you lose. As a girl, Sally saw an intruder try to break into their cabin. Her mother reacted instantly and took him down. It was a lesson she never forgot. She grew up with that mindset. When trouble threatened the area, she stepped up and demanded a weapon from a frightened neighbor. If he wouldn't act, she would. In 1833, she married Jesse Robinson, a man known for negotiating when he could and fighting when he had to. It looked like the start of stability, but the frontier rarely kept such promises. A decade later, the marriage ended. More husbands followed: George W. Scull, John Doyle, and Isaiah Watkins. With each turn of fate came new rumors. A string of deaths stirred suspicion, and even without proof, locals began tying Sally to the tragedies. Around the campfire, her name, Sally Scull, became a warning told to stubborn children. What's fact and what's legend is still up for debate. To some, Sally was simply living by the frontier's rules, fighting for autonomy in a world that wanted her silent. To others, she became a figure blown up by fear and gossip. Her ending also has competing versions. Some say Watkins betrayed and killed her for money. Others claim she just vanished. Either way, her story shows how the frontier could build reputations fast on the trigger and keep them alive long after the smoke cleared. Number 10. Sadie Marcus turned her life upside down early on. At 17, she left her family home and joined a traveling troupe where she learned to live on the road and win over an audience through grit alone. Years later, that path led her to Tombstone, in the Arizona Territory, a booming place filled with silver mines, crowded saloons, and growing tension between outlaws and the law. There, Sadie got involved with Johnny Behan, the county sheriff, an influential man known for making promises he didn't always keep. The relationship went back and forth, and in that in-between, she crossed paths with Wyatt Earp. Wyatt was already known as a lawman and a gambler. Amid local disputes and the chaos leading up to the OK Corral gunfight, Sadie and Wyatt grew close. She chose to stay with him even when it meant breaking ties and facing gossip. After Tombstone came new cities: Dodge, San Diego, San Francisco, and finally Los Angeles. Wyatt chased business ventures, horse racing, mining, and other schemes. Some worked, some didn't. Sadie managed their money, protected their reputation, and handled negotiations. She wasn't a bystander. She made choices. Their partnership lasted for decades. Wyatt died in 1929. Sadie carried on, guarding his memory and controlling what made it into print. What makes Sadie stand out isn't just her romance with a famous name from the Old West. It's how she navigated an unstable world, chose her alliances, and took charge of her own story when few women were allowed to speak for themselves.